content available with subtitling for persons with disabilities, and indeed for those with low literacy levels. In this session, we will switch gears and move to a slightly different, but of course related topic, which is audio description and how we make more entertainment content audio described for the benefit of those who are visually impaired, like myself. And we're really delighted that we are joined by two experts in the field. And I don't say this sort of, just as a cliche thing to say in a session of this nature, but I genuinely think that the people that we're joined with will really have a very constructive and insightful inputs for us in terms of concrete pathways that we can adopt to ensure that we have more content that is audio described. As blind people, we are all too familiar with the frustration of being shut out from entertainment content that is not disabled friendly. I recently went on Sunday night late for a late night movie called Sitaramam in Greater Noida. And I whenever I go for any movie, I wonder how nice it would be if it were audio described in a theater. And there's a lot of progress that has been made by streaming platforms like Netflix, and to a limited extent Amazon Prime, in making their content audio described. But there is still a long way to go because, for instance, third-party content that they get is not audio described. And what I would really like for us to do in this discussion of 45 minutes that we have, time is short, is to constructively discuss where we are realistically in terms of having content be audio described in India, what we need to do going forward, and how we can get there. Uh, as I said, we are joined by two leading experts. Sonali Rai heads the Enhancing Audio Description EAD division at the Royal National Institute for Blind People, and is really spearheading the RNIB's work on audio description. I had the great fortune of meeting with her when I was in London in May, and she gave me a lot of guidance and practical inputs, which I've been trying to use in my advocacy on this in India. And we are also joined by Dipendra Minocha, who is the Vice President of the National Association for the Blind. He runs two organizations called Saksham and SACTEC, and he's also the director for developing countries of the DAISY Consortium. There are many more things that both these people have done, but in the interest of time, I'm only focusing on the most critical facets of their bios. So, a word about structure. Each of our panelists will speak for anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes. Thereafter, I will ask them a few questions, maybe two rounds of questions, and then we will have questions from the audience. So Sonali, over to you first. I will just read out the prompts that I had sent out to Sonali and that she has kindly agreed to speak on. Um, First is what opportunities and challenges she sees for making more entertainment content audio described in the Indian market. And it would be particularly valuable to hear your inputs on this, Sonali, as someone who's, of course, Indian, but seeing this from the outside, as someone who's worked on these issues in England and is therefore exposed to that perspective as to what we can do in India and what the challenges are from your perspective. Second is third party content on streaming platforms, which they do not make themselves. How does that become audio described? What do we do about that? And third is a broader question in terms of what other pushbacks you face when trying to ask for more content to be audio described and how you counter them, so that we also have a roadmap that we can follow in our work in India on this. Over to you, Sonali.
Thanks, Rahul. Hi, everyone. Good evening. So Sonali Rai from the RNIB. That's the Royal National Institute of Blind People. We're a UK charity that supports people with sight loss in the UK. Let me just do a very quick introduction on audio description. So I lead the media and culture team at the RNIB. And I think it's a great pleasure for me to be here today. Great honor for me to be sharing the platform with Dipinder. I first met Dipinder ages ago when I started working at the RNIB, and my background is broadcast production, so I didn't know much about accessibility when I joined. And I don't think it would be wrong to say that the reason that we've got audio description in India is because of Saksham. I think tremendous effort. I'm really happy to see the media accessibility being under the spotlight and how it all fits together, and making the mainstream service that's consumed by sighted and people with sight loss in just the same way. I think what we're aiming for is parity, and that's what audio description gives us. So I'll give you a brief context to how audio descriptions developed in the UK, because that'll give us some of the answers to the questions that Rahul has just sort of shared with us. I was looking through my old notes when I was preparing for the session, and I came across this auditor report from the early 90s. For those of you who don't know, the Independent Television Commission in the UK launched an auditor consortium. This was back in 1991. It was a European project, and it was funded by the European Commission. And the whole purpose of the project was to explore the artistic production and technical issues of providing audio description on television. So that was the start of the service that we've got running on the TV today in the UK. There were 100 people who were given specialist receivers. They were asked for feedback on the impact and the potential of audio description. And that was 1994, the pilot. And 28 years on, so we've got about 80 television channels that have audio description. Just over 26% of the content across these channels is audio described. So it has taken us 28 years to get here. So it's not been a short journey. It does take time. But as Rahul said, the biggest push in accessible content that we've seen recently is because of streaming services. So for example, Netflix, Disney, that's Hotstar in India, I assume. And you've got Prime Video, then we've got Apple, Paramount Plus. I mean, it's a long list, and I don't really need to say much about it. We've all experienced it. It's completely transformed how we watch content. I mean, there are people on the bus and the tube and queues at the airport. They're all watching Game of Thrones. And the good part is that delivering an accessible service on these different services is more straightforward, provided they've thought of accessibility at the beginning. Provided the app has been made accessible, it integrates with screen readers, it's got audio description and subtitles. They're pretty much good to go. And I would give them credit. So they are rewriting the narrative almost. They've got massive catalogs of content with audio description and subtitles. But what's missing is consistency. The confidence that people will know if a new series has come out, it will have the access features in place at the time of launch. I will be able to watch the series with my friends or my family. I will be able to put comments on Twitter after having watched it, just share, be part of that buzz. So what do we need to make accessibility and access features part of that, that bigger equation? What we need is, I think, a number of factors to come together, I think, and at least that's what we've seen in the UK. You need support from the industry, of course. They need to understand how important access features are. You need end users embracing it and giving you a lot of feedback. But what you need most is strong legislation. I think accessibility, particularly when we're talking of a consistent, reliable service, even today is heavily reliant on strong legislation and monitoring by regulatory authorities. And what's also needed are very, very strong user organizations. I think India's got really strong user organizations in this sector. So at RNIB, we see ourselves as conduits between the industry and the end users. It's the end users who are driving the conversation. We've got this generation for whom audio description is not a novelty. They don't want to know how much content you've delivered with description. It's 10%, 15, or 20%. If a program, a drama, a documentary that they want to watch on the platform that they're using, on the app that they're using, is not audio described, then you fail to do your job. You may have done the rest of 40%, but it does not matter because there's a gap in accessibility. And I think what's changing right now is that they have a platform where they can share their frustrations. So social media is I think it's the great leveler right now. I think, Rahul, your first question, can you repeat your first question for me?
Yes, the first question was about challenges and opportunities in the Indian market that you see.
I think the challenge in the Indian market is just the same as as there are in all the other markets. I think it is awareness amongst end users and awareness within the industry. So we need to create more sort of almost more advocates for audio description in India. People who demand audio description when they come across a new piece of content, they need to reach out to the industry, because technically there is nothing stopping the industry from creating audio description and putting it on the different platforms on which they're operating. So I think that's where we need to start. And again, I think one of the gaps is a lack of legislation. So I think we need strong legislation that requires different streaming services. If we're talking about streaming services, demanding the streaming services to make at least a part of their content accessible for people with hearing and or sight loss. We have been sort of, obviously at RNIB, across the different user organizations in the UK, we have been advocating for strong legislation for streaming services for some time now. Still not there yet, but yeah, the struggle goes on. But I think there are some genuine challenges, and I completely understand. We speak to our friends from the industry. We understand the challenges around, especially the third-party content. I mean, quite often, as I understand the situation, the third-party content is quite often re-edited when it's put on a new platform, which means, let's say, for example, if a program has gone out on BBC and then it goes on to Netflix, the version that you see on Netflix may not be the same as the one that was put on BBC, which means the audio description track will need to be reversioned to put on Netflix. So it's not a simple lift and drop that would work for audio description. It does need to be reversioned, which takes a long time. One of the proposals in our consultation response has been that there needs to be almost a repository of audio tracks or of audio description scripts. If the audio tracks can't be shared between platform providers or streaming providers, then we need scripts to be shared, which will cut down the amount of time and the resource that are putting into creating new scripts for the same program over and over again. And I think, Rahul, what was the last question? Sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of third-party content, and just to summarize, what you're saying is that streaming platform need to do more in terms of getting scripts to have audio description. Is that right?
That's what I'm saying. I think it's not a simple lift and drop. So yes, you will need more work to be done. We need a repository of tracks, and I think there needs to be more sharing within the industry. They need to share resources. They need to share information and knowledge about what is being done within one media network. So it's not being replicated right from the start. At least some part of the work that has been done can be reused, if not the entire content.
Understood. So then perhaps what I'm getting out of your answer to this particular prompt is that what we need to do is that for streaming platforms that are making their content available with AD, they need to be more proactive about messaging in terms of how they are doing it, what it takes, so that they can then prompt third-party content creators to also follow suit. That's one aspect of it. But where assume that it's like, let me give you a practical example, right? The movie 1983 about the India's World Cup victory, like that came up on Netflix recently, and I was really, really keen to watch it because I'm a cricket fan. And I've heard so much about that victory, but that didn't have audio description. Now, in that sort of a situation, if I reach out to Netflix, what can they do in that situation? And then B, what else can I do as an end user? Because this is, being told that this is third-party content and therefore we can't do anything about it can't be the answer, right? Like there has to be some way out.
I agree with you, absolutely. I don't see any reason why Netflix can't produce audio description, not just Netflix. I'm not going to pick on Netflix, I think.
Of course, any
or just, using that as an example. I don't see any reason why they can't produce audio description or access features for Netflix. So that includes audio description and subtitles.
Right.
That is not up to, yes, it's becoming more sort of prevalent to have access features part of your commissioning contract. So when you commission a program or when you're acquiring content, if access features exist, then they become part of the package that's shared with you. But if
Yeah.
it's not part of the package, then I see absolutely no reason why these access features can't be produced by a streaming service.
Okay. And then could you just maybe spend the last couple of minutes of your initial remarks talking about what pushbacks you face when advocating for greater accessibility, greater AD, and how you counter them?
That's a very long list, Rahul. That's a very, very
But
long
maybe
list. But
brief, in
generally,
brief,
it is,
the top three maybe that come to mind.
yeah. I think I could, yeah, you could spend days talking about the number of reasons that we've heard why access features can't be produced. But I think it does boil down to resources in the end. We do not have the resources, sufficient resources to address the requirements of all programs. So that's what it boils down to. And I mean, I have to be, let's just say the streaming services have been trying to do a good job, and I think they do have a challenge on their hands because they have these massive, tremendous catalogs, but they will also have, tremendous resources at their disposal.
Yeah.
Make content accessible. So any, I would say, I think the only reasonable reason that I generally get or we get at RIB is there's not enough time, because there are a lot of programs that are delivered very, very late to a streaming service or to any other broadcaster. So let's say if a program is going on air or it's being dropped in the library, let's say within 12 hours, that doesn't give enough time to produce audio description. So I think that's quite reasonable. I understand why you can't produce access features for that program. But other than that, technical capability, that does not exist. I mean, yes, you all have platforms that are completely technical, that are, it's possible to have the secondary audio track on all those platforms. So that does not exist. There are no technical barriers. There shouldn't be any resource barriers as well. So late deliveries is probably in my list. That's the only reasonable barrier.
Got it. Thank you so much, Sonali. We'll now turn it over to Mr. Minocha. Sir, so I'll just read out the prompts that I had shared with you just to help you structure your thoughts, perhaps. One was if a user comes across entertainment content that is not audio described, what can she do in her capacity as an end user to make things better? Second was and this piggybacks on Sonali, one of the core points that Sonali made in her presentation about the importance of strong legislation. So how can we leverage the RPWD Act and the RPWD rules, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act rules in India, to advocate for greater content to be audio described? And third and finally, how can we ensure that, because this is a pushback that we often get, especially in the context of movie theaters, that if you were to give audio description, it would disrupt a sighted viewer's viewing experience. And of course, why should a disabled person be denied access because an able-bodied person is facing inconveniences? That would be my answer to that. But as a practical matter, of course, you can't say that in all circumstances. So how do you practically address that concern? These 3 points, it would be great to hear your inputs on. So over to you.
Thanks, Rahul, and hello to everybody. So some things which are besides these 3 questions, just to put things in perspective in what has happened in India and how the journey has been.
Yes.
As Sonali was saying, that we started audio description with Rami being the project lead at Saksham for audio description. We started this audio description from Saksham and way back in 2007. And we started approaching the producers and the film companies on with this concept and with asking permissions, because we obviously do not have our copyright exceptions law by the time. Everything had to be done with permissions and with this thing. And in any case, we wanted to involve all the film producers in this whole process, because we didn't have our dream to just audio describe everything ourselves. So at that time, of course, the first thing that we heard visiting them was who's asking for it, and that
Dipendra sir,
question
could I just
actually.
ask you to speak a little louder so we can hear you a little more clearly?
Okay, so
Better.
I don't know. I
Yes,
mean,
thank
am
you.
I am I am
Yes,
I better here?
better.
Okay, so
Yes, thank you.
what I was saying that uh, the question of that often the producers who are asking that who's asking for this sort of description, is there a big demand, is there a large population who wants this, that question remains still remains, because the voices of the users going asking for audio description is still very, very muted. Not many people are actually asking for it. um, Having said that, we obviously had this vision right from beginning that we will push for it. So uh, not just the supply side of it, not just creating audio description, but actually also creating awareness amongst the producers and, more importantly, amongst the users, to at least know that such a concept actually exists of audio description in India. And that has been obviously a huge big journey. We have been participating, for example, in the International Film Festival of India, uh, you know, happening in Goa every year, just to and holding special shows there, just to make sure that audio description is right there in these mega events, that all the people who know big names, they who come to see big names, they also see along with those big names or their audio described movies, and the people like Ramesh Sippy or these kind of names, known names, talking about audio description to the whole community there. Um, we have till now had about the audio described about 40 films. Um, but as I said, the main aim is that ultimately this audio description should become part of uh, the whole filmmaking production flow itself. And we should not be doing this separately after the film has been released. Um, so this was a phase for many years when we were creating special versions of the movies and distributing it also separately for to persons with blindness and low vision only, who could get access to this audio described thing. Second phase came when we tried our at that time was the time of DVDs. So so we would have DVDs released of these movies. And the second phase for us came when the audio description track was introduced in the mainstream distribution of those DVDs. So when the DVD would come to market, it would actually come with audio description as one of the options of audio channels like you have today in Netflix. That happened with few films. It did not actually catch the fancy of many people, unfortunately. But the third phase, which we tried, was that how to get it in the theaters. And that was a big challenge because we also had to answer the technology question, which you just put to me. That how do we go to a theater and sit and only us, we are having the audio description, and rest of the people are actually watching a normal movie. And we didn't have those kinds of resources to redo the whole theater, to fit that up with the audio description equipment. And some of the theaters which tried to do, like PVR tried to bring in such equipment into India, went into a lot of troubles. They could not actually import such equipment, and their equipment was actually lying in the airport for a long time and actually went back and never got inside India. So we actually started with did a leapfrog, because there was this new tech app on the mobile phone, which has both the tracks. One is the track of the original audio track of the movie, and the second one being the audio track of the audio description. And when we are sitting in the theater, the app would actually listen to the audio coming in the theater and match it up with the original audio track of the movie and synchronize it. And the corresponding part of the audio description track would start playing into our headphones. So this technology, the end result was that I'm sitting in the theater with my smartphone and a earpiece, the hands-free or a headphone in and the audio description of the movie which is going on in the theater is coming into my ear without any infrastructural changes and those kind of things. What it required was is that the film producers should share the audio track of their movies with the app, to be put on the app server, and the audio description is created when the movie is released. So one of the challenges, big challenges that we faced was that we spoke to many audio description, this movie theater houses, and they would actually, say that yes, show their willingness. Yes, we will be very happy. Let's do it. But when the actual time came for the release of the movie, I mean, they would not find any time for audio description work. It would go down in their preferences because at the last moment there is a lot that is happening, and this audio description thing would never become a reality. So we could just do it with very few, 3, 4 films. We did it with Sanju when it was released in the theaters. At least after 2 weeks after the movie was released, we actually got the audio tracks in place, and persons with blindness could actually go to the theater and watch that movie. Same, we also got the audio description track for a movie like Andhadhun. But then, of course, things, we were pushing with the the guild for the film producers. We got in touch with them. We got a positive response, but things were not moving. Then we got, obviously, this RPWD Act came in 2016. It had provisions, very clear provisions. The rules said that we need to have all the cultural materials, including, electronic media, etc., everything accessible. That's a very clear statement in our law. We actually went to the Information and Broadcasting Ministry saying that now is the time to actually implement it, and you should be issuing directive to the film producers that they should not be releasing their films without audio description. And one of the proposed mechanism was that when you submit your film for certification from the census board, you should actually submit it along with the audio description, and it should be made essential that the movie should have an audio description track, so that even that is actually verified and validated along with the rest of the movie for its release. But unfortunately, that was a time when things were heating up, that the COVID struck, and the whole theater and the whole Bollywood industry has actually, has gone into a big depression and in very tough times. So was the whole of this movement that we had built up. That also got into a backseat, so to say. Now is the time when it is again started picking up. In the next film festival, Goa, November, we again have got the permissions to have audio description shows. They are highlighting it. They wish to highlight it very strongly. We have been asking them that we again have to go to the next phase, that instead of having just the special shows in the International Film Festival, we actually should be having some of our mainstream movies shows which are happening there. They most likely, a lot of these foreign films which are being showcased, they would be having audio description tracks, and why not ask them as a part of their commission for the film festival, that if you have an audio description track, at least share it with us, so that we could have these mainstream shows based on these apps right in the film festival also. It's a kind of awareness campaign. It's not something which is business for us, but we are using all these tools and all these things as a means for creating awareness amongst the administrators, amongst the film producers, amongst, and more importantly, amongst the viewers themselves, which who actually should be making a lot of noise, because today we do have a legal right under our law, and if things are not audio described, we should be asking for it. And I'm sure the companies and the organizations will respond to it. Over to you, Rahul, for any questions.
Thanks very much, Dipendra sir, for that detailed, for the comprehensive and empowering encapsulation of how far we have come and your vision for where we need to go in the future. I will just ask a couple of questions, one of each of you, and then hand it over to the audience, open the floor to the audience for their questions. My question to Dipendra sir is, Mr. Minocha, is in terms of, you spoke about there being a strong legal formulation that we have now, which requires audio description and subtitling. What kind of precedents do we need to see from the courts to be able to ensure that this is actually implemented? So if you had to set forth your vision for the kinds of cases that we need to see, or the kind of direction that we need to see coming out from the courts on this issue, to ensure that the legal formulation is actually implemented, what would those be? And my question for Sonali is, Dipendra sir spoke about phases, and anything of this nature, of this scale, which requires a radical rethinking in how we produce content, will have to be done in a phased manner. So, if you had to share your vision for over the next 15 years, how we can ensure greater audio description and indeed subtitling in a graduated fashion, in a graded manner, could you share what the key phases in that would be according to you? So, Dipendra sir, first to you the question on precedents, and to Sonali the question on phases.
I think, Rahul, what we need is much clearer guidelines from the government to the industry, because only persuasion is actually not working with the industry. We have seen that. I mean, most of the times, even the audio description, which is happening outside the OTT, is actually happening with the CSR money. So the main industry money is actually not started producing audio description as of now. So very clearly, either the the government orders is something that we were trying for. As I said before the pandemic, we were very close, and we had the one-to-one very fruitful discussions with the minister, I and the minister, and he was he had meetings with all the stakeholders, plus issued even guidelines and gave a time of say 6 months to 1 year for them to start complying and becoming a kind of a straight order for it. But again, so besides that advocacy, I think through courts also similar orders can come up, because as I said, this right has been given to us. And if we challenge that this right is not being given to us, I think we can get a very reasonable orders from the court.
In a general manner, you think, or against any particular streaming platforms or studios or movie theaters or set-top box providers? So should the litigation be structured as a general direction, or should we take up individual cases, you think? We or anybody who does
I think this is something which is, things will happen. You need to have some specific thing to do. We create an example, and that example sort of, gets percolated into the whole industry. I think that is how things will happen. We will have to obviously challenge one specific thing which is not acceptable. Something similar that for example, you are doing with the web accessibility issue or banking issue or so many things that they are
Right.
picking up on specific things which are not accessible and getting a favorable order, which obviously will work out as guidelines for the rest of the industry.
Right.
I have actually not touched on the television part, which is obviously something which is still not sort of, we haven't been able to pursue it very strongly. We actually did have an effort again with Doordarshan. We wanted to have trials. There was a set-top box manufacturer that came on board. We even created a sample set-top box that never went into a trial stage with Doordarshan, direct to home service.
Right.
Unfortunately, because the officer who was very interested in pushing this got transferred. So for us, I think there are
Right.
lot of these issues of bureaucrats changing, etc. keep happening. But yes, I mean we need to pick up few specific uh, use cases where things are not accessible and challenge them for sure.
Right. Sonali, on phases.
Yes, I think that's again a very tricky question because I think the phases in India wouldn't be any different to again anywhere else in the world. I'd say the first thing would be getting legislation in place and really strong legislation with strong monitoring in place. And if the requirements of the legislation are not met by the service providers, then there needs to be some sort of pushback by the government
Right.
that this is not acceptable. I can tell you, for example, it's a UK-based example, obviously. So one of the broadcasters that did not meet the requirements for audio description, this was a few years ago, there was a fine of, I think it was £250,000.
Right.
Was not being able to meet the 20% requirement or the 10% requirement because it wasn't a
And who
PSA.
imposed this fine? Which authority?
So this was our regulatory authority. It was by Ofcom.
Okay.
So there
On
needs
a
to be
complaint being filed by someone, or they took action on their own?
No, so it is, these levels are monitored. So access services are provided by broadcasters. Broadcasters are supposed to update Ofcom on a sort of a 6 monthly basis on how much they've done. And if you haven't met what you're required to do, if you haven't met that level, then there's obviously always pushback. So that's strong monitoring. Strong legislation only works if there's monitoring as well by a regulatory authority. So I think I would say that needs to be the very first thing that needs to be in place. The second would be capacity building. So let's say even if there was a legislation in place, all broadcasters, all streaming platform providers, they have to have at least 10% of content or 20% of content with audio description. Does the Indian market has capacity to produce that much audio description at scale? So if there isn't, I think I don't know about that. I haven't studied the market as recently that much. But so again, capacity building, making sure there are enough providers there and enough technical solutions, sort of engineers in place who know and understand access services, and accessibility engineers as well. People who understand the viewing experience of blind and partial people who use screen readers and magnification to use these different platforms. And the third, in my view, would be empathy building. So empathy building, making sure all the service providers, all the different stakeholders, not just the service providers, government, regulatory authority, different user organizations, they're aware of what the viewing experience is if you have sight loss, any type of or any level of sight loss, because you need to participate in the mainstream world. So I would say start with legislation, capacity building, and then empathy building. And with that, I think one sort of almost a parallel strand of, user feedback. People being able to give user feedback. There needs to be a very strong channel that has a voice. Because it isn't just about quantity. It's not about, 4 films were released and all 4 were described. No, it's also about the quality of description. It's also about whether you're able to independently navigate the interface to find that content independently. So a lot of factors come into play when we're talking viewer experience. And I think more needs to be done to create awareness about that viewing experience and not just that access feature. So for that, you need strong user feedback, a channel almost.
Right. Right. So I don't see any questions from the audience right now. So maybe I can ask one final question. And Keshav, correct me if I'm wrong. And if there is a question, I can't see any. So then I can maybe just ask one final question from my end, which is to both Mr. Minocha and Sonali. If today people who run streaming platforms and are in positions of power, let's say Hotstar, if someone from Hotstar is listening to you, if someone from Netflix is listening to you and has good intentions, they want to make more content audio described, they have taken some steps, but they need more guidance, they need more encouragement, they need more vindication that they are on the right track. What would your message to them be? First to you, Sonali, and then to you, Mr. Minocha.
I think in such situations, I mean, we come across these situations all the time where service providers, they need more, almost more confidence, to understand whether the service is good or it isn't good, whether it's working or not. And we always say, ask the end user, ask your viewers whether your service is working or not. And quite often the industry does not have the right channels to reach out to the end user. So you speak to your user organization and ask them to put in some sessions with end users. So I think Dipender is probably more aware of which user organizations are probably best for this in India. But I would say speak to your viewers, because that's where you'll get the right feedback. And if it's if it's about technical advice, or if it's about just general production of audio description, then RNIB is very happy to be involved. But I'm sure Saksham has all the knowledge that's needed, to get the viewing experience absolutely right.
So yes, I think we have built that critical user base here. We have been successful in doing that by, as we said, the strategy that we adopted. So because of that, we do have a critical user base which can provide quality feedback on what is working, what is not working. We have people who know good quality audio description, how it is to be done. We have run workshops. We have worked with UNESCO also for running workshops on training more people on audio description. I think industry would respond. I mean, we are in a place where industry is ready to respond if there is a need for greater demand for audio description. I think I have complete faith in the capacity, that enormous capacity that Indian Commission has. For example, this app just came by just two entrepreneurs in India, youngsters who created this app as a technology solution. And now similar situation is actually coming from South Africa. They have been able to implement the similar thing in their country and ready to share that knowledge. In fact, it's a kind of a joint operation between Saksham and the organization in South Africa to come up with this app-based solution and to enhance this app-based solution experience. So capacity building, I completely agree. I think there is, once the legal thing is there, the capacity building is required, but we are actually very, very well poised. We have had almost a full decade of preparation time for all this, and we have very well poised for meeting that requirement.
So you would not agree, Dipendra, with those who say that this is a lost cause in a country like India with such a large population, and where other issues ought to be given priority. We just don't have the resources. It's a pipe dream. We just can't get there. You don't think that is true?
No, so that's a very interesting result of a survey that happened. So when we actually, because in terms of technology requirement, we keep doing this survey and connecting people on what is it that needs to come next. And it's a very loud and clear message from the users that actually the top priority for them was entertainment channels. So everybody is talking about education, employment, health, etc. But entertainment from the user's perspective access to these set-top boxes, accessible set-top boxes, and accessible television viewing experience and theater experience came at the top. So I don't think it's true that this is something which is not right now required in India.
Right, and for all those listening, I think the message couldn't be clearer. This is definitely an issue that everyone needs to take up seriously. It is an idea whose time has come, and those service providers who don't give this importance will only be doing so at their own peril and will lag behind as others in the industry continue to march forward in terms of making more content audio described and foregrounding the voices of persons with disabilities in the content that they create, so as to ensure that it is disabled friendly and that there is end-to-end accessibility, so that it doesn't happen that any disabled person has to walk out of a theater feeling alienated and isolated and feeling how nice it would have been if they too had been able to enjoy the movie viewing experience, because after all they have also paid for it. And if we can get to that sort of a stage, and it is very much doable, we are sort of on the right track, but we need concerted action. It's not going to happen overnight. People will need to take bold positions, and it has to be pursued with vigor by the powers that be. And people like us will continue to push for it in every way that we can. Thanks very much to Dipendra and Sonali for having this conversation with me, and for really outlining a vision for how we get more content, entertainment content, audio described. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much. For those who wish to attend the presentation that Nirav will be conducting in the next 15 minutes on accessibility standards that are currently being framed at 7:30 p.m., Keshav has shared in the chat box the link to join. So kindly do avail of that opportunity if you are able and